Good afternoon and welcome to Martine's Eco and Country Bites. Today I am very excited about this interview. I met this lady by divine serendipitous events. I call it Kismet. As someone who is a healer like myself and is living in one of the most beautiful places in the world right now. My guest today is Paula Carnell, and she is an apiologist, or in the study of, oh, it's such big words, aren't they? Melatonin. I knew I was going to get this wrong. Melatonology. Oh gosh, I almost got there. I'm going to show a beautiful image right here. There she is on the beautiful Cocos Keeling. Welcome to the show, lovely, lovely woman and soul sister, Paula.
Oh, thank you so much. What an introduction. For those who are even more confused by all the long words, I just work with bees and honey.
She's a bee guru.
Oh, getting there.
I think so. I would like to think so. We've had some very in-depth conversations, and I have talked to a number of locals, and they have also met you in their travels and seen some of your podcasts, and they said, oh, I love her work. So perhaps we can sort of go over where your love of bees and working with bees came from, Paula, and perhaps your background. That would be great for our viewers to hear that.
Okay. Yeah, it is. It was more divine intervention. So I was an artist. I was a professional artist for over 20 years, and I thought that was my sole purpose. I was meant to create these paintings of beautiful flowers and bring joy into people's lives. And that went very well till I was 40. And then I collapsed and I became bed and wheelchair bound. And it took 6 years before I was then diagnosed. So at 46, I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. But I was severely disabled. I was completely bedbound. And I was told I'd never walk again and I'd be dead by 50. And up until that diagnosis, I was very active mentally in trying to find out what was going on with my body. And I had help from my mum, and I had carers because I really was bedbound. And I had young children at the time. My sons were 9 and 11 when I fell ill. So it was difficult. And my husband, 2 years into me being ill, my husband, at my request for a birthday gift, built me a beehive. And the idea was that whilst I was bedbound, I'd have something to watch. I could look out of the window from my bed and watch bees, because I just felt this calling that there was something about bees. And also mentally to try and cope with the fact that I could no longer paint, I couldn't go out, couldn't read, couldn't watch telly, nothing, couldn't even look people in the eye. I was thinking about what can I do? And after 2 years of meditation, I was ready for a distraction. And I just kept thinking, well, before, when I was an artist, it was one of those things that, when I retire, one day I'll keep bees, but I didn't really do anything about it. And so it was like, okay, well, perhaps now I could keep bees. And so again, through more divine intervention that I write about in my first book, Artist to Bees, a beekeeper, came into my world, and he put bees into my hive, and he taught me beekeeping, and he taught me conventional beekeeping. Now, most people would think that beekeeping is probably one of the most natural things you could do, that you've got a bloke with a long flowing white beard and he'd be at the bottom of his garden just at one with the bees. However, it couldn't be further from the truth. Thankfully, it's going back that way. But because of, so I'm from England, so, that to give you a bit of history, 30 odd years ago in Europe, a mite came into the world of beekeeping called the Varroa mite, and that really changed beekeeping. So going back to me being ill and watching bees, as I was taught what is now conventional beekeeping, I realized that a lot of what was making bees sick was the same that was making humans sick. And as I healed myself through cleaning my environment, both emotionally and physically and environmentally, I realized that the bees were here to tell us about what a mess we're making of things. And when we understand the impact of our environment and our lifestyle and our food and nutrition and everything, when we understand the impact that has on bees, it makes us think again about the impact all this has on us. You know, we think we're separated, you know, we think we're different. So yeah, this is a picture of the project that I'm doing now, which is just, it fills my heart with joy. So I'm now following a calling. So I got better in 2015, and then I became a bee consultant. So I would advise landowners on how to reintroduce bees or manage bees, both the wild and the and manage bees in their environment sustainably. And back when I was an artist, I had a dream about Cocos Keeling, having had no connection with it at all. You know, I live in England. I'd never even looked at maps of Australia or the Indian Ocean. And I had this very clear visual dream of flying over a jetty, looking out of a window and saying to my mum on the plane, that's Cocos Keeling, it's paradise, and it's just off the Isle of Wight.
Wow. Jealous of the Isle of Wight. I like that.
I know, that was that little sort of twist, just to say, you know, keep your toes.
This is just a dream. It's not here yet.
Yeah. So, but the crazy thing is that then since 1992, when I had the dream and I was an artist, and then I came into, you know, I was ill, then I came into bees. And then when I started working as a consultant, I met someone who was born and grew up in this house who photographed me as a beekeeper for a client. And he is a Clunis Ross and a photographer, and he told me about his brother who still keeps bees on Cocos Keeling. And I was like, Cocos Keeling, I've heard of it. But the crazy thing is, we are now living in the Clunis Ross house. So the sponsor for us to be able to come and live here is the owner of the house, and it's a small sort of Airbnb. And he, you know, we got to be in the house, but the guy who built the house, George Clunis Ross, in 1893, he actually died in the Isle of Wight.
No, that is crazy. Oh, that's my kind of woo-woo. I love that.
Oh, it is. So, and then it goes.
So your dream was completely accurate. It's just that there was one connection back to the other, and that's what it was about, is like the connection was going to be so intrinsic that you would meet that bloodline that would lead you to that, of those people, which is kind of exactly what bees do with their communication, and like colonies and hiving is like through their communication, is like through that same frequency. Love this. That's an incredible story. I didn't know that last little bit. That's incredible. I want to go back, take it back a little bit and discuss, because in Australia, the CSIRO has been banging on the drum about getting rid of beehives. I was there and witnessed it myself in northern New South Wales and New South Wales, where they were going along and destroying hives, and people were actually trying to hide their hives. They were going through all the areas where they were put in the national parks to keep regenerating that area, because there'd been a lot of rainfall and a lot of destruction and a whole bunch of other things that had a massive impact. And so they went in and they were killing hives everywhere. So like I said, the varroa, we've talked about this varroa mite. What is your comprehension of how deadly this is? And I mean, we have a whole plan here in Australia. It's called the Emergency Plant Pest Response Deed. That's interesting word, isn't it? Of 2005. So that was 20 years ago now that was put together, and the CSIRO is still following through that. What's your comprehension of this mite and how deadly it's going to be?
Okay, so we've had varroa mite in Europe for over 30 years. Yeah. And there has been a program and training on managing varroa, which is very chemical and management based. So it's opening up the hives, it's checking for varroa, it's counting the varroa and then destroying it. But you're trying to kill an insect on an insect. And what is interesting is, even on the Australian government website where they talk about varroa, they say that any chemical treatments are harmful to bees and to humans if not used correctly according to instructions. So we're adding a chemical to try and kill a bug that lives on another bug. Now, also these chemicals are neurotoxins. They have so many different effects. And what I have learned since keeping bees and researching what I felt intuitively needed to be done with bees, or how we needed to manage them, I needed to look up the science to sort of back that up. And even when you use a natural, so perhaps an essential oil, as part of a chemical treatment, that affects the fertility of the second generation of the male bees from a colony that's been treated.
Okay, so does that mean that the queen that then gives birth to the next generation then has had an ongoing effect on the hormone balances of the males that she gives birth to? Is that what you're saying?
It could be the queen, but it could also be held in the wax. Because you're treating a hive, and because the larvae are developing in the wax, and because of the temperature, it could be that. So, you know, there's so many factors. And the basic thing to consider is we've had varroa mite in the UK since, you know, about 1991, 92, which is interesting because it's the year I had my dream. But we still have a varroa problem despite chemical use for over 30 years. However, there is a growing band of beekeepers. The biggest, sort of most well-known studies are from 2000. So we've had 25 years of not using chemical treatments, and those bees are doing fine. Now, there's several things at play. There's this whole idea that we are separate from insects and nature, and therefore whatever we do to it is not going to impact us. So that's the one thing. The other thing is this disregard for nature or bees being able to solve their own problems. And there is this global attack on feral bees. Now, a feral bee could be generations of wild bees that have lived undisturbed in a tree somewhere or in a cave, or it could be a swarm from a managed colony that has escaped and gone to live in a more natural way. And those bees are like public enemy number one. And I know the Australian government were destroying feral bees without even checking, you know, what the results were. And with the project I'm doing here on Cocos, what is interesting is we don't have varroa here. We're a very isolated island. We're 2,700 kilometres from Perth. You know, we're right in the middle of the Indian Ocean. There's a completely strict biosecurity, so you can't bring bees or anything in here. So the bees that were here were brought here in the 1940s. And as far as I know, the last queens were imported about 10 years ago. So you've got colonies of bees that have been isolated for that long. Now, when I have been talking to people in the field of biosecurity and beekeeping and bee management, and particularly conventional ways, and I say we haven't got varroa, they're like, oh, great, you could breed queens and send them back to Australia. But they're missing the point. The queens here have never been exposed to varroa, so they're going to be really vulnerable. They won't have come up with ways of managing it. And this is the key. When bees are exposed to varroa and left to their own devices, yes, you will have collateral damage. You will lose some bees, but the strongest bees will survive and breed. And you will then find that you have bees that can live with varroa in harmony. You know, that it's not detrimental anymore. And that's what we need to get to globally.
And also by reintroducing them into an environment that they're, one, not familiar with at all, but they're not used to predators that are from that area that they may not have on Cocos Keeling. People don't comprehend that. It's like, oh, we'll just pop them here. It's like, that's what we did with the cane toads. No, let's not do that. Like, let's be very mindful of the similar mistakes we've made, even though they might not be the same species. But we know that we've had a massive impact by what that was, because they didn't have a natural predator in Australia, whereas over in South America they did. So they It was, let's just say that was a monumental, yeah.
Yeah, and we love the
Anyway,
bees.
yeah. So let's, like you and I, when we first met, I love that you're wearing. That came from Pachamama. Got a call out for that, Pachamama there, in Bridgetown. Um, yes, this is where we met, and we got talking about the healing capacity, not just of honey, and not just of proper. Gosh, I've got my
Propolis.
words. Propolis, thank you. I've really got tongue tied today. But my mind comes also back to when I was looking at the hieroglyphs in Egypt. I've been to Egypt many times, and when I would go back, and so of course there's a lot of questioning of the actual dates of the hieroglyphs. They're saying 5 and 8,000, and other people are saying, oh, it's much older than that, 70, 100, 200,000. So I would say let's go, way back, because some of the things that you're looking there, and bees were regarded as royalty, or seen as the royal bloodline too. They indicated that they're a signature of royalty in Egypt. They were called the Tears of Re. And in that, they used to transport bees along the Nile as things were blossoming. And because it's such an arid place, and so they were seasonally transporting, which is a very, very unique and rare way of beekeeping, because being able to transport the hive along like that back in those days would have been quite the fate. Not being eaten by crocodiles too on the side of the Nile. There's an interesting one. There's some
Yeah.
definitely occupational health and safety issues there. So let's talk about healing, because beyond just that, people know about honey and propolis, but let's talk about frequency healing. And that is something that I discovered in Egypt. There were these very ancient, I mean, very, very ancient. They were way more than 8,000 years old. They said that this went way beyond some of the other buildings that were there, and there were these large slabs of stone cut with many holes, and you'd lay on top and there'd be frequency played from underneath. And one of the things that they suspected is they might have used bees as some of that healing. So maybe you can give us some insight to that, because I've got some incredible photos here of some of the work that you're doing there.
Oh, thank you. So bees have a different frequency, and the way I got into this was when I was working as a consultant. When I first started working, my goal was to work with the native bees. And the first estate that I worked with, the large estate that became a public gardens and hotels, is the Newt in Somerset. So you can search that on the internet and see what I've done there. I did a bee museum, and we worked with hives. Now, when I first got there, there was just one colony of bees that were feral, and then a swarm that had moved into a hive from neighbouring beekeepers. And so what I did over the next 7 years, so I was there until I came here in April last year, was measure how the bees expand naturally. And one of the things I needed to do was find where the wild bees would swarm to. So I would put up bait hives. And as I was observing swarms from my own colonies, because I'd already been keeping bees about 8 years, I found that there was a pattern, and bees would regularly swarm and cluster on the same tree or the same part of my garden, And I was working with a lovely chap called Matt Somerville, who is a tree beekeeper. So he makes tree hives and he monitors bees in trees. And we would go and take bees out of people's roofs sometimes. Now, we're both natural beekeepers. And in the natural beekeeping movement, there was an idea that wild bees would always live like half a mile apart. You wouldn't have them closer, which is an argument against having apiaries with thousands of colonies of bees in.
Yeah.
But Matt phoned me up one day and he said, I had a really weird thing happen today. He said, I was called out to move a swarm, and he went up to somebody's roof, and there were 3 colonies in the roof, really close to each other, all healthy, no varroa, all with lots of honey, and all really calm. So 3 colonies of wild bees living in a small space all together in harmony. And he just said to me, what does this mean? And the first thing I said was it an old rectory? And I don't know why I said it, but he said, yeah, it was near the church.
Yes.
And then I was thinking, I wonder if they're on a ley line. And I didn't really know a lot about ley lines, even though I live near Glastonbury in Somerset and we're in this massive ley line grid. But I had done a bit of dowsing and I knew a bit about energy lines. So then after the call, I thought, right, I'm going to look into this. And then I came across some work by, oh my gosh, his name's completely gone. Anyway, he's a bit of a maverick beekeeper, and he started researching connections of bees with frequencies. John Harding, that's his name. And I found a book by him, which I read, and he was sharing how in NASA, they were trying to get people up into space. And one of the things they found was that people were getting sick when they went up into space. And some bright spark realized that it was because they were disconnected from the Earth. So the Earth has a frequency of 7.68 hertz. And when you go into space, you're disconnected from the Earth. And humans normally have a frequency of 70 to 100 hertz. And so by reconnecting with the Earth, that's how we're meant to be evolved. This is why grounding is so important. We're just meant to be connected. And I'm sure many of the people who follow you will know about the connection between frequencies and emotions. So those low frequencies of, 60, 70, 100 would be like grief and guilt, sadness, sorrow.
Shame.
And shame, yeah. And then you move up to courage at 150 hertz. And the next frequency, 250 hertz, is presence or being neutral. Now, bees have a frequency of 256 hertz. Now, the other interesting thing is you've got the Earth's frequency of 7.68 hertz, but if you have water moving, flowing underneath the Earth, and the movement of that water creates a different frequency, a different vibration that comes up like a curtain, and that frequency will be between 250 and 350 hertz. Now, the other connection, this is what I love, is everything is connected. The blue jay, which is a bird we have in Europe, it migrates following the energetic pathways of the 250 to 350 hertz. And the blue jay likes to eat acorns. So what it does is as it flies, it sows acorns for oak trees. And then when it flies back, or its ancestors fly back, or its grandchildren fly back, they will then dig up those acorns and eat them, but they miss some. So what we have across the British countryside is we have these long lines of ancient oaks that were sown naturally. And in the natural beekeeping world, there is this thing about bees living in oak trees. Well, they're on the same wavelength. They're on the same frequency. And if you have an old oak tree with a hole in it, it's a perfect habitat. So what I do when I work with clients is I measure their land and find these energetic spots where the bees are going to come. Because if you position a home on those energetic spots, the bees will move in. Now, you'll obviously get bees in areas where it's not the same, but just like humans, if your frequency is meant to be in a sunny place on a beach side and you're living in a tower block, you're not going to thrive.
That's me.
So, this is what we have to look at, is energetic beings. And going back to the Egyptians and prehistory, humans were much more connected to the Earth, and they knew that certain places held a different vibration, held a different energy. And the 250 to 230 vibration of being present, of being neutral, was an excellent place for negotiation. So tribes or groups of people would often meet under an oak tree, somewhere where they felt the energy was right and there wouldn't be any aggression. They could put all their spears and guns or whatever down and actually negotiate and come to a resolution. So then when Christianity came, they often built the churches on these special sacred places. So you'll find across Britain that many churches actually have wild bees living in the roofs because they're on that wavelength. And then when you travel around the world, the zongs in Bhutan, when I traveled around Bhutan, the zongs were all meditated on, you know, where their placement would be. And they're on these high energy lines. And you have wild bees hanging on the outside of these big temples. And then this is some wild bees on Kekeskiling. And it's very, very interesting here because the highest point above sea level is 1.5 meters, and we have 1.7 meter tides. So where this colony is, the bees haven't been underwater, but the tree, they're on an octopus tree, and that has actually been underwater. So the landscape around that colony of bees has changed just, you know, month to month since we've been here. So it's been really interesting watching that. But when I visited them, they're really calm, really chilled out. You can get really close, and they're happy because they've created a home that's on their wavelength. And so when you're approaching bees, if you approach bees and you're on that same frequency of being present, then you become invisible to the bees. They can see that you are at one with them. But if you approach a hive and you're carrying grief or sorrow or sadness or anger, then they're going to want to bring you up to their wavelength. And the quickest way to do that is to give you a little jab. So they will sting you. But they'll sting you on the meridian that you need healing on, because they see us as balls of light, collections of little vibrating cells that are emanating light. And if you have a cell that's sick, it's going to be a different color, and they'll see it, and they'll just give you a sting to stimulate your immune system to help heal you. So bees are the connections between the heavens and humanity. They are here to heal us. And the reason so many people are interested in bees and wanting to know more about bees, and in the most simplistic way thinking, I need to keep bees, is because nature is calling, and our receiver from the communication of nature is our gut, is our intuition. And so we're feeling this intuition, and we're buying mugs with bees, we're buying tea towels with bees, we're buying anything with bees on, because we just know we have to connect with them somehow. And there's many more women, particularly like myself, who are around the world, and great people like Matt as well, who are speaking for the bees and really sharing what the wisdom is that the bees are sharing with us, and how now is a really, really important time to listen to the bees and change. Wake up.
Wow. Brain may have just exploded with excitement a little bit there, I have to be honest, all that information. So going back and digesting some of what you've just said, so the connection between the oak tree and, is it underwater streams or streams that can be on the surface?
It can be either, but mainly underwater, because you'll have that movement within two solid pieces, and so that movement is just going to create the curtain. But I've just done some virtual work for a client in England. So I've been measuring their land, but from here. So I did a scaled up version of their map in the back garden here. I've got to point that way. And so I just scaled up the map. And then I plotted places that were of this high vibration. So I'm looking for places with bees, but it could also mean water. And when we went through the map, he said, oh, you've got 3 marks here, which is really interesting. And I said, well, have you got oak trees there, or is there anything there? He said, no, there's nothing. And then a week after, he messaged me and he said, oh, you won't believe this. So I told him about the water. They had a really unusual high quantity of water, and they've got a river that flows through, or lots of rivers and streams that flow through the estate. And they'd often wondered where one disappeared and where the bit that came up came from. And what happened was the water levels rose to reveal a stream exactly where I had marked this place for the bees. So they now know where that underwater stream is.
Wow. This is incredible, because the comprehension of how we can apply this knowledge, wisdom, and healing is quite remarkable. For me, unfortunately, I'm allergic to bees. I've been stung so many times. That's because in the country, when we were kids, we would have the sprinkler on, and of course, Dad probably hadn't mowed the lawn because he was busy, and you'd be running outside and the bees would be coming in to get the water from the sprinkler we tread on. So I would say that that's just a bit of an Aussie iconic kind of situation there. That if you haven't had the initiation of walking on a bee when you're running under the sprinkler on the black lawn, then you haven't had your rite of passage. But it's interesting about what you say. For me, actually, bees have stung me in situations where I've had very strange things happening in my life, and they showed me that they were following their energy a couple of times, that something did need to be healed. Either I was being stabbed in the back when I got hit in the back, and I was like, oh, that was strange. And then I had another situation, and unfortunately got stung on the side of my top womanly area, my boobs, and it was just sort of side of my heart. But I think I was walking, and it must have been sitting there, and I feel like it was doing healing on me, but I didn't see it because it was very bright. I was down the beach, and as I walked, it stung me. Oh my lord! I got rushed off to have medical assistance, but that's fine. But for me, so could you say that perhaps those people that are suffering from anxiety and that sense of disconnection, because the connection between the ley lines and water is one thing I've known about for a long time. And when we have changes in our magnetic grid, and it changes the flow of water, and how the frequency of underwater streams can be positive or negative depending on what way direction they're going. I'm well aware of that from the healing work and the spiritual work I've been doing for some time. Do you think that you said 256 hertz is the frequency that bees predominantly make when they're in a rested, calm state? Is that correct?
Yes, but you're looking at a hive, you're looking at a colony, so it's the collective.
Colony. Right,
yeah.
That makes sense. So that is the frequency then that if you were doing sound healing with, which I think we have some beautiful photos here, those lovely girls that were dressed up. I think this is the one here.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, this is where on Cocos Keeling, I'm living within a Cocos Malay community. So we're the Orang Putih, the white people in this community of about 500 Cocos Malay Muslim people. And I've been teaching the Muslim women beekeeping. But also what I'm doing is showing how healing with bees can help. So I have got some local women that are coming and sitting with bees, and just to feel the frequency of the bees. And it's been shown to help with PTSD. And there is a history of trauma here because of the slavery background. And this house was the original colonial house. So there's a lot of associated things there. But this lady was actually from a passing yacht who'd had a back injury. And the yacht owner met me and we got talking, and she said, oh, I think you can help this girl. And so she came, and I actually did 2 treatments on her. And I'm a Reiki master healer as well. So I combine the Reiki, and each treatment is different. It's unique to the individual. But it was so transformative. And this girl, it turned out she is a healer. She does sort of movement and yoga type therapies for people, and breath work. That's her thing.
Yeah.
But happened to be working on a yacht for a year. And it's just so powerful. My husband made a makeshift sort of screen there. So, but just to make sure, because she was going into sleep, it was like an hour-long treatment, I put her in a bee suit so she could really relax. But yeah, it's been so powerful, and I love this. I love this combination. And while I'm doing the treatment, I'm just channeling whatever the bees have to say. And it's just so transformative. The bees want to connect, they want to help people, and combined with the Reiki, it's magic. It really is wonderful.
That is incredible. So is that something like, I guess, with when you're doing meditation and working for collective, because that's what bees are about, working towards the collective energy for the highest consciousness, and raising the vibration to work collectively in harmony. That's exactly the frequency that bees hold, which is what we're going towards on this planet. Oh my God, there's a huge big spider on the floor in front of me.
Oh, when you
I'm just going to keep my feet up right now. I shouldn't have looked down.
Now, why has she come in? What is the spider trying to tell you?
Yeah, no, she can go somewhere else. Thanks very much. If I get up very quickly and just make some sudden movements, you know what I'm taking.
Oh, yeah, is she a jumping one? We've got huntsmen here. They're a bit,
oh, my face, I've got a bit red. We're not going to talk about that right now. That's what I've got in front of me.
Oh, dear. Have you got a little alarm button?
Okay. Okay, so getting back to that, and combating, like, you know, that's fear response. Obviously, I need some 256 hertz now. Okay, so when I love the spontaneity of how this works. So with that, you know, working, and I need definitely my on balls. Working with that and moving forward, do you think it's possible to start making sort of like recordings of different beehives and sharing it with healers around the world? Because as a frequency healer myself that uses light and frequency with my clients, I know that so many others that I know, plus I would say that in everyday life, people are craving that connection, that calmness. And it's hitting into neutral gear. There is a dropping down into, and when you drop down, it drops down into heart consciousness, but it's not just heart consciousness. It's a little bit between the heart and the solar plexus, which is where the oneness really comes from, but it's staying in a state of neutral love. So is that something that you're looking at, that doing some recordings of that perhaps and sharing that with the world as your part of your gift as well?
Absolutely. There is a chap that I really want to work with. We've been messaging backwards and forwards. He's in the UK. He records nature. So he records plants and measures the frequency and vibration and then turns it into music. And I really want to bring him out here, but it's literally a case of fun. So if anybody listening wants to just fly him out here so we can do that, it would be amazing. But when I'm back in the UK, he'll be recording my bees, but the bees here are special as well. So we've got to do that. But the other thing, that I was going to say was about the, oh no, sorry, it's gone completely out of my head. So it obviously isn't relevant. Yes, healing, the frequency healing of bees is so powerful, and we do need it. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Now, what is interesting is this collective inability to relax and calm down. Bees, when they're exposed to toxic pesticides that we use on the things that we eat when we're growing our fruit and our vegetables, because they're neurotoxins, they affect the ability for the bees to calm down. So bees in a natural healthy state will spend the majority of their time resting or sleeping. But when they've been exposed to toxic chemicals, they are unable to rest. And what happens is that their whole life cycle speeds up. So they start flying. They should live 6 weeks. And so they should be inside the hive for 3 weeks, then flying for 3 weeks. But what happens is you start getting bees thinking, oh, I've got to go out and forage because the older bees have now died. So all their lifespan is reduced by half. And so they go out flying and they're not mature enough. They haven't collected the wisdom of the landscape, the environment. Their wings aren't strong. Their wing muscles aren't strong. You end up having bees that are too young, rearing the babies, and the bees die shaking. Now, if you look at some of the human conditions that we have at both ends of the scale, from youth to old age, of these tremors, and this is what the bees have. And so there's a direct link to our environment.
And I'm a big advocate for living organically as much as possible in every shape and way. I think it's what saved my life 30 years ago when I got incredibly ill, a bit similar to yourself. I didn't require to be hospitalized or bedridden or anything like that, but I wasn't able to function in life just every day. And I had to do cellular healing, a lot like what you've done there, Paula, with your journey. And so in this, I think that this sharing of wisdom and reconnecting back to land, reconnecting back to nature is vital for our flourishing as oneness in moving forward for the health of the planet. I think and that's why the bee and the shape of the hives with the hexagon, it represents the building block of our civilization, our life in general as carbon matter. So in that, I think that bringing more awareness why we should not be using sprays like that is so, so vital. And all of these things about the connectedness of, the elements, it's elemental connection and how that's then expressed through living things, whether that's trees and plants. And ecological literacy is something that I used to teach children. And so in that, coming back to relearning ecological literacy and looking away from just being in a laboratory where it's isolated, it's just under this, and there's a lack of connectiveness because there's no applicability. People don't know how to do that. What do you think we're moving forward with not only just the healing, but change in relationship back to nature-based? Do you think that's something you're seeing more and more?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a great believer that we do have power and we do create our own reality. And I feel that the bees are fifth dimensional beings that have appeared now in our third dimension of reality, our third dimensional perspective of reality, to show us what happens if we stay on that path. And we're seeing a lot of bees dying in that 3D experience. And yet, when you go to places which are more fourth and fifth dimensional, whether it's the people or the environment, the bees are thriving. And I see this with humanity, that we have this divide. We've got the world is splitting, humanity is splitting, spirituality, everything is splitting. And we have these two absolute truths that are running parallel. And it's up to us to choose which one we want to be in. So although I dip a toe in the three-dimensional one, and, for most of my life, people would probably say, oh, she's weird, she's crazy. And I probably have had a foot in the fifth day for a long time. But now what I find is when I talk about this quite openly, people who'd never even heard of it, never even considered it, are going, oh, yeah, that sounds right. And if you think about the 3-dimension being about selfishness, separation, fear, and you look at the 5th dimension as being that connectiveness and understanding that you can't harm one without another or yourself, and understanding that it's all about collaboration, all about connection, all about the whole, that's what bees represent. And we have a choice. Which world do we want to create and which world do we want to live in? And the more you move towards one or the other, the more you see that reality. And so if you're struggling, if you're feeling like you're drowning in a 3D reality, just try and switch some of it off. And
the quickest way is through gratitude.
Yes.
Gratitude.
Yes.
Gratitude.
Yeah, gratitude.
Just sit and say whatever you are grateful. Just the simplest things.
Yeah. Even, and actually, when I was ill, it was very difficult. And there were days, I had a gratitude diary, and there were days where I would think, gosh, what have I got to be grateful for today? And it was, and even when I wasn't grateful to be alive, I mean, there were times where I really, really, really was struggling. But I remember there was a blue tit, a little bird that was coming to my bedroom door. We're on the ground floor, so we had a bedroom door with a door handle on the outside. And this blue tit would come to the door and just peck on the window and around the door. And I remember writing it as my gratitude diary that the blue tit visited me again today. And I just felt I had this connection with this bird. And then it was only like a year later when I was able to get out of bed and walk round. And I noticed that we've got the spider link, all these little cobwebs around the handle and the keyhole of my door. And that's what the blue tit was going for, was eating the spiders. But I thought
I could do with one here right now.
Yeah, I'm sending blue to energy. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow, this has been so illuminating. And I'm sure for many people that are listening to this that have never delved into a lot of frequency healing, frequency and comprehension of what's going on in nature and the elements and how we are connected to that. And the more that we disconnect or interfere in that, nature knows what it's doing. We need to keep out of its way. More than anything, I think that I'm incredibly grateful for what I've learned today, but I'm hoping that we're going to have much more conversations about this in the future, Paula.
Oh yeah, because we didn't really go into the Egyptology, and there's some things I've learned about bees and Easter Island or Rapa Nui, which are phenomenal. So there are these ancient connections.
Yes. Part 2. That'll be part 2.
Yes.
Thank you for joining me today on Martine's Eco Bites on Edge Radio. Thank you so much, Paula, for being my guest.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm so pleased that the heavens brought us together.